Emotional subtext is the lifeblood of a story like this, where the surface events are seemingly mundane, but underneath, there is a storm of conflicting emotions. It's not about what is said or done outright. It's about what is not said, what lingers between glances, silences, and routine acts. The human heart is rarely simple. Even in ordinary settings, a quiet hallway, a clinking glass, the sound of distant water, there's a history pressing up against the present. When a character feels something they can't name, that tension seeps into everything they do. They might grip the counter just a second too long, hesitate before knocking on a door, or stare a moment too long at something meaningless. These are the quiet tremors of a conscience in conflict. Guilt doesn't need to announce itself to be present. It's in the way someone avoids their own reflection in a hallway mirror. It's in how they suddenly remember a smell, a phrase, a night, and it all hits them harder than it should. And just like that, the ordinary becomes heavy. A sound, like the water rushing from a neighbor's shower, is just sound. But to someone with a heart in turmoil, it becomes layered. It reminds them of intimacy, of time, of aging, of closeness, that once felt accidental but now feels intentional. Longing lives quietly in people. It doesn't always come with declarations or obvious yearning. It shows itself in rituals, in how often a person finds a reason to linger near a certain window, or how they take longer routes just to pass a familiar porch. The 60-year-old neighbor, perhaps unaware or perhaps knowingly distant, becomes a symbol more than a person, an anchor in the narrator's life, a mirror of maturity, a stranger they somehow feel deeply familiar with. That longing could come from many places: a missing sense of connection, a dissatisfaction with one's own path, or the comfort of being noticed, even briefly. These feelings, while never voiced, move beneath every decision. They guide subtle choices, the ones we make without even realizing we're making them. Confusion is perhaps the most honest emotion of all. The narrator could be caught between what they think they know and what they're starting to feel. It's not always about right or wrong. It's about how easily life blurs the lines between what should be and what is. They may try to rationalize their own actions, pretend certain moments didn't feel the way they did, or convince themselves they're simply being friendly, thoughtful, neighborly. But then something breaks through. A look, a phrase spoken at just the right tone, and it all becomes clear, even if only for a second. Then the confusion deepens again, as real emotions often do. In stories like these, emotions don't scream. They whisper, echo, and build like steam behind a closed door. That's the true essence of emotional subtext. The sound of running water is the first thing that catches attention, not loud, but steady, like rainfall against a tin roof. It drifts through the thin walls separating one apartment from another, softened by age, by plaster, by years of repetition. There's something oddly grounding about it, the kind of sound that makes you pause whatever you're doing, even if just for a moment. The early morning sunlight falls across the wooden floorboards in strips, filtered through half-closed blinds. Dust floats lazily in the light, catching on the air like memories that refuse to settle. A kettle whistles faintly from the stove, echoing the tension beneath stillness. Everything feels real, tangible, lived in. The hallway smells faintly of lavender soap and old wood. Footsteps echo differently here, heavier, slower. Each step feels deliberate. The chipped paint on the neighbor's door tells stories of time. Little scratches around the doorknob suggest fumbled keys, late-night returns, a life of small routines. The newspaper still sits folded on her porch table, dampened slightly by the morning dew. A pair of black slippers rest side by side, neatly, aligned, waiting. These are details people overlook unless they're paying attention, unless they're looking for something to hold on to. The weather outside hums quietly, a soft spring breeze rolling through, lifting curtains ever so slightly. The fabric sways, like breath, like hesitation. The air smells faintly of grass, of something green and full of change. A dog barks distantly, birds call from the wires above, but inside, there's only stillness and the continued rhythm of the shower behind the neighbor's wall. Water slaps tile. It's constant, measured, like a heartbeat. You begin to imagine the tiles, white, likely worn at the corners. The mirror fogging, catching only blurs of shape and motion. A hand brushing steam away, revealing a face half hidden in condensation. The realism grounds everything. You don't have to see it to know it exists. The kitchen counter feels cold under your fingertips. You stand there, unmoving, staring at nothing in particular, just the morning unfolding. Coffee sits cooling in a mug, untouched. The cup is chipped at the rim, a tiny fracture in an otherwise complete picture. It mirrors something internal, though you're not sure what. The sink drips softly. Time passes in these minor sounds, in the background noise people grow used to. But today, they feel heavier, fuller. Like the world has leaned slightly into the personal. The old neighbor's world exists just across a wall, but feels miles away. Her shower ends. The water slows to a trickle. Pipes groan, then fall silent. Steam likely swirls in her bathroom, invisible but real. Towels folded thick and neatly, the warmth of tile under bare feet. These details live only in the mind, constructed not from fantasy, but from lived familiarity. Noticing them isn't strange. It's what people do when silence is too loud, when emotion seeps into ordinary things. The door stays closed. The house quiet again, but somehow everything feels different. She was always kind, in a way that didn't ask for anything in return. Not the kind of neighbor who brought over casseroles or gossiped by the mailbox, but the kind who gave a soft smile when passing, who kept her garden in careful order, who waved with eyes rather than hands. The bond was never defined. It simply existed. A gentle familiarity. She lived alone, yet never seemed lonely. There was a dignity in the way she moved, in the care she took with her routines. You could see it in the way her plants thrived, how her laundry always smelled of clean rainwater and not of fabric softener. There was always a light on in her kitchen, always something cooking, simmering, becoming. The narrator didn't seek her out. Not at first. It started with small things. A shared glance on trash day. A thank you for collecting mail. An umbrella offered in a sudden downpour. The kind of gestures that sit quietly in the heart and build slowly. There wasn't a name for what they had. There wasn't a need for one. But gradually, something unspoken started growing between them. It didn't feel like a spark. It felt like a warmth, like walking into a room that always smells like home. The age difference, the circumstances, the moral boundaries, all of it floated just out of reach, acknowledged but never addressed. She never touched his hand. He never crossed her threshold. Yet every shared moment left an imprint deeper than the last. He found himself watching her more closely, not in a way that violated, but in a way that tried to understand. How she tilted her head while watering the ferns, how she sat on her back porch with a book and read slowly, as though savoring each page. How her laughter, rare but genuine, always caught him off guard. There were layers to her. She wasn't just a woman in her 60s, she was a memory in motion. Someone who had lived through heartbreak and still chose to plant roses each spring. Someone who didn't rush, who carried silence like a song she knew by heart. It became complicated when she began to notice him too. Not just as the neighbor who waved and smiled, but as someone present. Someone she waited to hear pass by her window. Someone whose absence echoed louder than footsteps. Their conversations were brief, weather, books, plants, but the pauses in between said more than their words ever did. She once mentioned her late husband, not as an anchor, but as a soft shadow. He nodded, unsure how to respond. She looked away, and that silence was the most intimate thing they had shared so far. Neither of them said anything they shouldn't have. There were no confessions, no declarations, no lines crossed. But emotions don't need permission to exist. They simply do. And between them, between the age, the spaces, the choices, was a connection built not on touch, but on mutual understanding. And that, perhaps, made it all the more complicated.